Okay, so you want to own a data center. You picture rows of sleek, quiet server racks bathed in ambient blue LED lights, humming softly in a climate-controlled sanctuary, while the entire internet flows through your building. You imagine sitting back while big tech corporations pay you massive monthly checks for the privilege of storing their cloud data, turning pure electricity into passive digital gold. Sounds simple. It is not simple. You think you're stepping into the booming software economy. In reality, you may have just found the fastest way to lose $500 million. The cloud isn't made of steam and software. It's made of high-voltage steel, diesel exhaust, and cold, hard cash.
So what are you actually buying when you hand over hundreds of millions of dollars for a building full of computers? You're not buying cloud storage, artificial intelligence, or high-tech algorithms. You are buying high-voltage electrical grid capacity and industrial thermodynamic heat extraction. Your customers bring their own servers, their own software, and their own data. Your job isn't digital innovation. Your job is taking 115 kilovolt power off the local utility grid, stepping it down through massive transformers without dropping a single millisecond of current, feeding it into silicon processors that burn like miniature furnaces, and violently pumping millions of BTUs of waste heat out of the roof 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the digital economy, you aren't the brain, you are the radiator. And if the radiator fails for even 30 seconds, millions of dollars vanish into thin air. How much does it actually cost to build one of these industrial fortresses? Imagine standing in the middle of a quiet Virginia pasture where 70% of the world's internet traffic flows right under your feet. This is Loudoun County, Virginia, known across the industry as Data Center Alley. Here, entry costs are measured not by square footage, but by megawatts of critical IT power capacity. You think concrete and steel are expensive? That's the cheap part. The real financial predator is hiding in the copper. A small regional edge facility with 2 to 5 megawatts of power might set you back $30 million. But if you want to compete for major cloud tenants with a 50 to 100 megawatt wholesale hyperscale facility, the 50 to 100 megawatt monsters built for Microsoft or Amazon, the cost explodes to somewhere between $7 and $12 million per megawatt. That means a standard 50 megawatt facility isn't a $50 million building, it's a $600 million mega project. You don't just plug into the local power grid like a retail store. You have to pay the utility company to build a dedicated high-voltage substation on your land, costing up to $30 million before you even pour a single slab of concrete. Inside, you must install massive flywheel or lithium-ion backup systems that cost $15 million, paired with $20 million in industrial centrifugal water chillers. And because your contract guarantees 99.999% uptime, known as 5 nines reliability, you have to line your concrete yard with a battery of 2.5 megawatt diesel generators, each costing over $1 million, supported by fuel tanks holding hundreds of thousands of gallons of diesel fuel. To make matters worse, custom high-voltage transformers now take up to 150 weeks to deliver at $3 million apiece. Before a single megabyte of data crosses your threshold, you will spend more on backup batteries and copper wiring than most companies spend in their entire operational lifetime. So you have $500 million ready to deploy, but who stands in your way before you can even break ground? Your first and most dangerous adversary isn't a rival data center operator, it's the Regional Electrical Grid Transmission Organization. Getting approval to draw 50 or 100 megawatts off an aging power grid requires entering an interconnection queue that can take anywhere from 3 to 7 years just to complete engineering studies, costing millions of dollars in non-refundable fees with zero guarantee of approval. In 2022, Dominion Energy shocked developers in Northern Virginia Pennsylvania by announcing that transmission capacity was so constrained that new data center grid connections would be frozen for years, stalling billions of dollars in planned construction overnight. If you manage to survive the power grid, you run headfirst into local community battles over water rights and noise pollution. Modern evaporative cooling towers can consume up to 500,000 gallons of fresh water per day for a medium-sized facility, triggering fierce public resistance in places like Chandler, Arizona. Meanwhile, suburban residents routinely organize against data centers due to the deafening, continuous 85-decibel low-frequency drone generated by massive rooftop chillers and cooling fans. If the county board denies your rezoning application or caps your noise thresholds by 3 decibels, your $30 million plot of land instantly transforms into an unbuildable pasture, burning $50,000 a day in pure interest while sitting in pitch-black silence. Once the grid is connected and the chillers start humming, how does the money actually flow into your account? On paper, it looks like an absolute money printer, but there's a catch. Your revenue model is built on layered tiers of power, space, and connectivity. Layer 1 is wholesale megawatt leases. Big tech hyperscalers rent raw power capacity in bulk blocks under long-term contracts. You charge them based on committed capacity, typically between $100 and $150 per kilowatt per month. On a 10-megawatt wholesale contract, that yields a baseline shell revenue of $1 million to $1.5 million every single month, regardless of how much hardware they actually install. Layer 2 is retail colocation, where you rent individual cabinet racks for $1,200 to $2,500 per rack per month. Layer 3 is metered power billing, passing through the raw electricity costs consumed by tenant servers with a markup of 10 to 20%. But then comes Layer 4, the secret hidden goldmine of the entire industry, known as cross-connects. Inside your facility sits a meet-me room where telecom carriers and enterprise networks interconnect. If a trading firm in Cabinet A wants a direct fiber optic link to a cloud provider in Cabinet B, they cannot run a cable across your floor themselves. They must pay you to run a single yellow patch cord between their racks. Colocation giants like Equinix charge between $300 and $600 per month for every single cross-connect cable. That single fiber cable costs you $15 to purchase and 10 minutes of technician labor to plug in. Over a 10-year lease, that $15 piece of glass generates over $50,000 in pure 98% margin revenue. A major connectivity hub with 30,000 active cross-connects pulls in tens of millions of dollars a year solely from maintaining tiny plastic cords. You might sell yourself as a tech infrastructure titan, but your highest profit margin comes from renting out tiny plastic cords that cost less than a family dinner. If the revenue is that incredible, where does all that cash evaporate every single month? It doesn't trickle away, it gets consumed by a relentless financial furnace. Your single largest operational hemorrhage is the electric utility bill. Data center efficiency is measured by power usage effectiveness, or PUE, the ratio of total power entering the facility versus power consumed by actual computing hardware. A PUE of 1.5 means that for every 10 megawatts powering customer servers, you burn an additional 5 megawatts just running chillers, pumps, and power distribution losses. On a 50-megawatt facility operating in a warm climate, electricity costs alone become a financial predator, waiting every month to swallow $2 to $4 million in cash. Next comes mission-critical specialized labor, 24/7, 365 shifts of high-voltage electricians, MEP engineers, and armed security staff whose sole job is ensuring that power never drops for a fraction of a second. Insurance premiums are equally staggering, covering specialized environmental liability for holding hundreds of thousands of gallons of diesel fuel in underground tanks. Then there are the non-negotiable utility demand charges. Power companies charge reservation fees based on your peak capacity demand. meaning even if your facility sits partially empty during a lease transition, your electric bill doesn't care. The electric utility is not your vendor. They are your silent, senior partner who gets paid long before you ever see a single dime. What is the invisible lethal mechanism that catches rookie operators completely off guard? It isn't a power outage or a security breach. It is the sudden, violent arrival of density obsolescence. Imagine spending hundreds of millions of dollars building a state-of-the-art facility designed around standard cloud computing densities of 5 to 8 kilowatts per server cabinet. You allocate your building's space and cooling capacity perfectly to match that ratio. You sign your first batch of tenants and fill 30% of your floor space. Then, overnight, the industry experiences an earthquake, the explosion of artificial intelligence. NVIDIA releases its H100 and Blackwell GPU chips, and every tech giant on Earth races to build AI clusters. But AI server clusters don't draw 8 kilowatts per rack. They blast 40, 80, or even 100 kilowatts per individual cabinet, generating heat so intense that traditional air cooling melts, requiring liquid direct-to-chip plumbing. Instead, suddenly a new AI customer moves into your facility and consumes your entire 10-megawatt electrical allocation and cooling capacity, while occupying only 20% of your physical warehouse floor. What happens to the remaining 80,000 square feet of pristine white space? It becomes stranded space, a ghost town of empty concrete that cannot host a single additional server rack because you have zero power or cooling left to feed it. Facilities worth hundreds of millions of dollars become structurally obsolete overnight. You can be completely sold out of power, staring across a wide-open, empty warehouse floor, unable to earn another single dollar. Who figured out how to master this physical chess game and build an empire out of power lines? In the late 1990s, while Wall Street was feverishly chasing volatile dot-com software startups, one man saw through the illusion. His name was Hossein Fateh. Fateh was a sharp-dressed real estate developer known for his relentless focus on power logistics, driving his custom Porsche between acquisition sites across Northern Virginia. While everyone else was buying software, Fateh realized that data centers weren't speculative tech plays. They were long-term, net lease infrastructure investments backed by utility grid capacity. Together with his business partner L. Tab Williams Jr., Fateh and Tab Williams co-founded DuPont Fabros Technology. They treated land with proximity to high-voltage power lines as premier beachfront real estate, quietly land banking parcel after parcel in Loudoun County before the rest of the world realized its true value. They constructed mega-campuses like ACC2 and ACC3 in Ashburn, building standardized power structures that allowed tech giants like Microsoft and Yahoo to expand seamlessly without spending their own capital. Fateh understood that big tech wanted reliability and massive scale above all else, and he structured DuPont Fabros to act as the ultimate physical landlord for the digital age. By the time Digital Realty acquired DuPont Fabros in 2017 in a landmark deal valued at $7.6 billion, Hossein Fateh proved that in the digital gold rush, the real fortune didn't belong to the ones writing the code, but the landlord who owned the power plug. But what happens when the high-voltage dream collides with financial debt and market panic? Enter Ellen Hancock. Hancock was a formidable former IBM senior executive and Apple CTO who commanded boardrooms with rigid corporate discipline. In 1998, at the height of the dot-com frenzy, she took the helm of Exodus Communications. Exodus was the undisputed darling of the early internet era, hosting web infrastructure for internet royalty, including eBay, Yahoo, and Amazon. Driven by Wall Street's insatiable demand for growth, Hancock spearheaded a breathtaking, debt-fueled construction blitz, building massive internet data centers across North America, Europe, and Asia. At its peak in March 2000, Exodus boasted a market capitalization of $30 billion, and Hancock was celebrated as a titan of tech infrastructure. To fuel this expansion, Exodus took on more than $3 billion in high-yield debt, building out facilities years ahead of actual demand under the assumption that internet traffic would grow exponentially forever. Then came 2001, and the dot-com bubble burst. Hundreds of cash-strapped startups, Exodus's core client base, evaporated into thin air. But while customer revenue vanished, Exodus's massive fixed obligations remained entirely immutable. Debt doesn't care if your customers disappear. The millions owed monthly in real estate leases, high-voltage utility capacity reservation fees, and interest payments did not shrink by a single cent. Server halls turned into quiet ghost towns as row after row of server racks went dark. Cash reserves were incinerated in months, trying to maintain empty climate-controlled facilities. In September 2001, less than 18 months after being valued at $30 billion, Exodus Communications filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Ellen Hancock resigned. Equity holders were completely wiped out, and billions of dollars in pristine data center assets were liquidated for pennies on the dollar. When the tides of speculation recede, a 100,000 square foot facility with no paying servers is just an extraordinarily expensive monument to empty air. So how thin is the wire between breathtaking profits and total financial liquidation? Let's look at the actual math on a 10-megawatt facility with 8 megawatts of usable IT load, 800 server rack capacity, and 100,000 square feet of building space. On paper, in scenario A, the good year, you become rich. Your facility operates at 95% capacity utilization. You lease out 7.6 megawatts of power at an average rate of $150 per kilowatt per month, generating $13.68 million annually in baseline rent. Your Meet Me room thrives, hosting 1,500 active cross-connect cables at $400 a month, generating another $7.2 million a year. Total gross revenue reaches $20.88 million. Your operational expenses include electricity at a streamlined PUE of 1.3, costing $5.3 million. Operations, specialized labor, and property taxes run $4.5 million. Interest on $50 million of debt at 7% costs $3.5 million. Total costs equal $13.3 million, leaving you with an enviable net profit of $7.58 million for the year. One small shift changes everything. Consider scenario B, the bad year. Local client churn drops your occupancy down to 60%. Your leased power falls to 4.8 megawatts, dropping baseline rental income to $8.64 million. Your cross-connect count collapses to 500 active links, bringing in just $2.1 million. Total gross revenue drops to $10.74 million. But look at your costs. Because your facility is operating at partial capacity, your cooling efficiency degrades to a PUE of 1.6, and minimum utility grid reservation charges remain in full effect, pushing your electric bill up to $5.8 million. Fixed staffing, insurance, and taxes drop only slightly to $4.2 million, while your debt service remains stubbornly locked at $3.5 million. Total expenses come out to $13.5 million. 35% occupancy disappeared, not 35% profit, everything. Instead of making over $7 million, you just lost $2.76 million in pure cash. The difference between those 2 years is $10.34 million, the exact distance between swimming in free cash flow and total financial liquidation. So if you still decide to step into this arena, understand what you are actually buying. You came looking for passive income, smooth software margins, and sleek blue LED lights. You are actually buying high-voltage utility interconnects, industrial cooling contracts, and real estate tied to a high-wire financial balancing act. You wanted to sit back, sip coffee, and watch the digital world stream through your gleaming server halls. Just remember that while the cloud lives in the sky, its anchor is buried deep in the ground, and if the power stops running, the whole thing falls on you.